As you can see, we looked at a little bit of Jesus Christ in Texas, a story by W.E.B. Du Bois last week. But this week, we are supposed to move on to looking at some different forms of art, including visual art and dance. So I will get to some of the visual art later, although I've decided to focus more on Jacob Lawrence than on Aaron Douglas. But what I would like to do first is to finish up with the W.E.B. Du Bois story, Jesus Christ in Texas. You'll probably have to rotate this so that you can see it. As I said last week, this is a story that begins with a description of a chain gang, and as a colonel and some other chain gang proprietors rent out a group of incarcerated men for $125 apiece, they come across a stranger, and everyone at first among this group of elite white Southerners feels very drawn to the stranger and has extensive conversations with him, invites him to the house. However, they will soon recognize that the stranger is not a white person as they assumed, even though he had a white voice. So here on page 72, after the colonel and his child and his wife have had this long conversation that they cannot remember, they turn on a light and they see that the stranger is not a white person. And the specific phrase is, the man was a mulatto, surely, even if he did not own the Negro blood, meaning that even if he didn't admit to it, he was not a pure white person. His long coat looked like it was made of a Jewish gabardine. His hair hung in close curls down the sides of his face, which was olive, even yellow. So whether he's Middle Eastern or Sicilian or someone who's a light-skinned black person, it doesn't matter to them. He's still not white. Then various guests come to their house for a dinner party, and they have varying levels of recognition. The first moment of recognition, though, comes when the colonel sees in the eyes of the stranger the soft, tear-filled eyes of a brown girl. And then the butler comes in, an ancient black man with tufted white hair with the tea tray, and he falls on his knee to the floor and says, "My Lord and my God." Now, it's interesting that the elderly black man immediately recognizes the stranger, whereas the white people are just somewhat confused. So the nurse, the child's nurse, also recognizes him, and as he begins to say things like, um, kingdom of heaven and go forth and sin no more, it should become clear to the reader that the stranger is Jesus Christ. So the wife of a judge comes in. She doesn't recognize him. A rector comes in and thinks, gee, I used to know this guy, but can't quite place him. A man of 40 and well clothed. And then the rector says, I've met you somewhere. Surely you remember me, do you not? And the stranger says, I never knew you, which is a pretty big statement for Jesus to make to a man of the cloth or a pastor. So the story continues, and the stranger says, go and sin no more. And then the scene leaves the colonel's house and goes to one of the chain gang convicts who has escaped. And the bloodhounds are chasing him. He is running away, and the stranger who has left the colonel's house and walked away intervenes to save the convict who's about to be caught by the bloodhounds. So what happens is the man crept and cried and jumped and ran, streaming with sweat. A greyhound shot out of the woods, howled, whined, and fawned before the stranger's feet. Hound after hound bayed, leapt, and lay there. Then silently, one by one, with bowed heads, they crept backward toward the town. And it's interesting, of course, that the dogs do recognize the stranger. And the convict calls the stranger an N-word, says, you're an N-word too. Recognizes him and tries to justify himself in his stealing. However, the stranger tells him, thou shalt not steal, and seems to bring about a conversion in the convict. And the next change of scenery after the colonel's house and the woods is a farmer's house. So I will stop for a minute there.